You think you know how these stories end. The mob boss gunned down, the outlaw shot in a blaze of glory, the serial killer strapped to a table and given exactly what he deserved. That's the version the movies sold you. It went down easy, it was wrong. Al Capone spent his final years in pajamas, unable to recognize his own wife, with the mental capacity of a 12-year-old. And it wasn't a bullet that did it. The man the FBI shot outside a Chicago theater may not have been John Dillinger at all, and that body is still buried under concrete and chicken wire because nobody will let anyone check. The most famous last words in Nike history were spoken by a man who demanded his own execution in a Utah cannery while the ACLU fought to keep him alive. These are the real endings, the ones they buried. Come with me. Subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. Number 1. Al Capone wasn't taken down by the mob, the FBI, or a rival's bullet. He was destroyed by a bacterium the size of a human hair. The image you carry is Scarface, the Tommy gun, the iron fist over Chicago. But here's what nobody talks about. Capone contracted syphilis in his early 20s, working as a bouncer in a Chicago brothel. Too ashamed to seek treatment, he let it rot through his body for 2 decades. By 1938, prison doctors at Alcatraz formally diagnosed him with neurosyphilis, syphilis of the brain. One psychiatric evaluation assessed his mental age at approximately 7 years old. 7. He spent his final stretch on the Rock playing banjo in an inmate band called the Rock Islanders, confused and disoriented, unable to follow a conversation. When he was released in 1939, Johns Hopkins Hospital refused to admit him because of his reputation. Union Memorial took him in. He died January the 25th, 1947, in pajamas at his Palm Island estate in Florida, age 48, of cardiac arrest. The most powerful criminal in American history was conquered not by a rival and not by a G-man, but by a disease you can cure with a single shot today. Number 2. Bonnie and Clyde were not the glamorous outlaws the 1967 film made you fall in love with. Imagine sitting in a Ford Viv-8 on a Louisiana back road eating a sandwich. That was Bonnie Parker's last moment. In May the 23rd, 1934, a 6-man posse opened fire without a single word of warning on Louisiana Highway 154. In less than 16 seconds, they fired approximately 130 rounds into that car. Clyde Barrow, age 25, took 17 bullets. Bonnie Parker, age 23, took 26. Neither one fired back. When it stopped, Bonnie's body still held part of the sandwich she'd been eating when the first shot hit Clyde. The smell, according to a posse member, was light perfume mixing with gunpowder and blood. What followed was worse than the ambush itself. One woman cut off bloody locks of Bonnie's hair and sold them as souvenirs. A man tried to saw off Clyde's trigger finger with a pocket knife. An estimated 20,000 people showed up to view the bodies. By that point, Bonnie could barely walk. Her legs had been severely burned and disfigured in a 1933 car accident. These weren't glamorous rebels. They were desperate, broken, and running out of road long before that posse showed up. Number 3. A Machine Gun Kelly was a brand, not a man. His wife invented him from scratch. Born George Barnes in Memphis into a comfortable middle-class family, Kelly was a mediocre bootlegger until he married Catherine Thorne around 1930. She bought him the Thompson submachine gun, gave him the nickname, and distributed spent cartridge casings to underworld contacts as souvenirs, managing his image like a publicist with a client. The famous line, "Don't shoot, G-men," the phrase that allegedly gave federal agents their enduring nickname, almost certainly invented by a journalist. The FBI's own account has agents finding Kelly hungover in his pajamas, cowering in a corner with his hands raised. At Alcatraz, fellow inmates nicknamed him Pop Gun Kelly, after the cork guns children play with. He died of a heart attack at Leavenworth on July 18, 1954, his 59th birthday, and was buried under a stone that read simply, George B. Number 4. Robert Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz, never kept a single bird at Alcatraz. The most famous nickname in prison history is built on a geographical lie. Stroud raised nearly 300 canaries at Leavenworth, not Alcatraz. He was transferred to Alcatraz in 1942, specifically without his birds, after officials found he'd been using bird care equipment to secretly distill alcohol. He spent 17 years there without one feather to his name. The 1962 Burt Lancaster film turned him into a gentle, persecuted genius. What the movie left out: Stroud murdered a prison guard in cold blood in the Leavenworth mess hall in 1916, stabbing him to death in front of 1,100 witnesses. A psychiatrist who evaluated him reported he described his violent acts with apparent sadistic pleasure. Inmates who actually knew him at Alcatraz were blunt about who he really was. He died of natural causes on November 21, 1963, one day before JFK was shot in Dallas. His death made barely a ripple. He had been imprisoned for 54 consecutive years and never once saw the film that made him famous. Number 5. The Alcatraz escapees were never confirmed dead, and one of them may have sent a letter from Brazil. June 11, 1962. Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin vanished into San Francisco Bay on a raft built from over 50 stolen raincoats. Morris, with a tested IQ of 133, masked 6 months of drilling through concrete by playing accordion every evening. See the fake heads in their beds, built from soap, cotton, paint, and real hair from the prison barber shop, fooled the morning guard. The official verdict: drowned. But in 2013, a letter arrived claiming to be from John Anglin, stating all three made it that night. 5 facial recognition analyses of a 1975 photograph allegedly showing the brothers in Brazil returned results consistent with a match. The U.S. Marshals kept the case officially open through 2026. Nobody knows. That's not a satisfying ending, but it's the honest one. Number 6. Charles Manson was never executed. He died peacefully at 83, outliving the woman who actually held the knife. Most people carry a blurry assumption that Manson was executed for the murders he orchestrated. He wasn't. He died of cardiac arrest from metastatic colon cancer on November 19, 2017, at a Bakersfield hospital. His 1971 death sentence was automatically commuted when California's Supreme Court ruled capital punishment unconstitutional in 1972. All death sentences in the state converted to life that day. He was denied parole 12 consecutive times. At his first hearing, he sang. Manson outlived Susan Atkin, who personally carried out the murders, by 8 years. He outlived his own son, who changed his name and died by suicide in 1993. He died in a hospital bed at 83. History doesn't always deliver the ending you feel it owes you. Number 7. Richard Speck wasn't executed, and 5 years after he died, a secret prison video changed everything. Speck murdered 8 student nurses in Chicago in a single night in 1966. Most people assume he was executed. He wasn't. The same 1972 Supreme Court ruling saved him too. He died of a heart attack on December 5, 1991, one day before his 50th birthday. That would be the story, except in 1996. So journalist Bill Curtis obtained a secretly filmed prison video from 1988. On camera, Speck appeared with female-like breasts from illicit hormone use, counting a roll of $100 bills, casually snorting cocaine, and describing the murders. Then he said, "If they only knew how much fun I was having, they'd turn me loose." The Illinois legislature gathered to view the tape and stop the screening when the sexual content began. There was one guard on duty for every 20 prisoners. In gangs ran the facility. The families of 8 murdered nurses sat with that information. Gone. Number 8. Jesse James was shot in the back while doing housework. St. Joseph, Missouri, April 3, 1882. Jesse James took off his gun belt, set both revolvers on the sofa, pulled a chair over to a dusty picture on the wall, and climbed up to clean it. Robert Ford drew a .44 caliber revolver and shot him in the back of the head. America's most mythologized outlaw died unarmed, 34, on a chair. The conspiracy theory started within hours. In 1948, a 100-year-old Oklahoma man publicly claimed to be the real Jesse James. In 1995, the body was exhumed. DNA testing showed a match of better than 99% with descendants of his sister. An attempted exhumation of the supposed imposter in Granbury, Texas, failed for a perfect reason. They dug up the wrong body entirely. Number 9. Whitey Bulger, one of America's most feared mob bosses, was beaten to death with a padlock within hours of arriving at a new prison. October 30th, 2018, James Bulger, age 89 and wheelchair-bound, was transferred to USP Hazleton in West Virginia. He was dead by 6 a.m. Mafia hitman Fotios J.S. and gangster Paul DiCollegiero used a lock attached to a belt to beat him in his cell. He was described as unrecognizable. Inmates knew he was coming before the transfer was announced. At 3:30 the previous afternoon, one of the men told his mother on a recorded prison phone call they were expecting a high-profile arrival. The deepest irony. Bulger spent years as an FBI informant, feeding information on rivals to federal agents. He was murdered by a man who had previously killed a mob boss specifically for cooperating with the FBI. The thing Bulger spent a career betraying others to avoid became the exact reason he died. Number 10. Jack Ruby died at the same hospital as the two men whose fates were tangled with his. Jack Ruby shot Lee Harvey Oswald on live national television on November 24, 1963. 3 years later, he was dead of lung cancer at Parkland Memorial Hospital in Dallas, the same building where President Kennedy was pronounced dead on November 22nd, the same building where Oswald died on November 24th. 3 men bound together by 2 days in November, all drawing their last breath in the same corridors. Ruby's murder conviction had been overturned just months before his death. A new trial was ordered. He never made it. His last coherent recorded statement, "There is nothing to hide. There was no one else." Number 11. Henry Lee Lucas confessed to 600 murders and probably committed 3. After his arrest in Texas in June 1983, Lucas's confessions climbed from 60 to over 600 murders across 26 states. Police departments flew detectives in to have their cold cases closed. For every confession, Lucas was rewarded with steak dinners, strawberry milkshakes, and cigarettes. A newspaper investigation later proved it was physically impossible for him to have committed many of the crimes. Cashed paychecks placed him in entirely different states on the dates in question. Lucas later called the whole thing a deliberate hoax to expose how easily law enforcement could be manipulated. Do the math. Governor George W. Bush commuted Lucas's death sentence in 1998, the only death sentence Bush ever commuted, in a term where 152 other prisoners were executed. Lucas died of heart failure in 2001. Every case he falsely closed is in effect still unsolved. Hundreds of actual killers may have walked free because their crimes were signed off on the word of a man eating a milkshake. Number 12. Roscoe Arbuckle was fully acquitted. He died the night he got his life back. Hollywood, 1921. Lee Arbuckle was accused of assault and the death of actress Virginia Rapp at a Labor Day party. The key accuser had sent telegrams to attorneys before she even came forward. "We have Roscoe Arbuckle in a hole. Here chance to make some money out of him." She was a known extortionist. No physical evidence of assault was found. After 3 trials, the third jury deliberated 6 minutes. 5 of them spent writing a formal apology, calling the prosecution a grave injustice. He was banned from the screen anyway. His legal bills exceeded $700,000 he directed under a fake name for years. In June 1933, Warner Brothers signed him for a feature comeback. On June 29th, he signed the contract. That evening, he told his wife it was the best day of his life. He died of a heart attack in his sleep before morning. Number 13, the Marquis de Sade died peacefully in an asylum, and, according to the science of his day, had the skull of a saint. The man who gave us the word sadism died on December 2nd, 1814, at age 74, at the Charenton Asylum outside Paris, of a gangrenous fever. not executed. His will specified no grave marker, and that acorns be sown so all traces of him would vanish from the earth. Every single wish was violated. He received a Christian burial despite being a committed atheist. His skull was removed for phrenological study. The doctor's conclusion: exceptional benevolence. Art in all respects similar to the skull of a father of the church. History's most notorious deviant had the skull of a holy man. That skull was then borrowed by a touring lecturer who died in Boston in 1832, with it still in his possession. It has never been recovered. Number 14, Mata Hari faced the firing squad with extraordinary composure and was almost certainly innocent. October 15th, 1917, just past 5:30 in the morning, Chateau de Vincennes. Margaretha Zell, age 41, refused the blindfold and blew a kiss to the firing squad. The sergeant major said afterward, "This lady knows how to die." French military intelligence files unsealed in 2017 showed no credible evidence she ever functioned as a spy. British intelligence, declassified in 1999, reached the same conclusion. The French army was losing badly and needed a scapegoat. No family claimed her body. Her head was embalmed and stored in a Paris anatomy museum. In 2000, archivists discovered it had vanished during a 1954 relocation. To this day, nobody knows where she is. Number 15, D.B. Cooper probably didn't survive, and an 8-year-old found the evidence. November 24th, 1971, a man calling himself Dan Cooper hijacked Northwest Orient Flight 305, collected $200,000 in ransom, and parachuted out the back of the plane into a nighttime storm over the Pacific Northwest wearing a business suit and loafers. The parachute he selected couldn't be steered. He didn't notice the reserve chute was a sewn-shut training dummy. On February 10th, 1980, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram pulled a rotting package from the bank of the Columbia River. It held $5,800 in deteriorated $20 bills, serial numbers matching the ransom exactly. No other bill from that ransom has ever surfaced anywhere in the world. Not in circulation. Nowhere. The FBI investigated over 1,000 serious suspects before closing the case in 2016. It remains the only unsolved commercial airline hijacking in American history. Cooper left behind a clip-on tie and 8 cigarette butts. That's all that's left of whoever he was. Number 16, Gary Gilmore demanded his own execution, and his last words became the most famous advertising slogan in sports history. After murdering 2 men on consecutive nights in Utah in July 1976, Gilmore was sentenced to death. He fired his lawyers, rejected all appeals, and went on hunger strike when execution was delayed. The ACLU and NAACP filed motions against his explicit wishes. He and his girlfriend attempted a double suicide pact. She smuggled pills in through a balloon. Both survived temporary comas. January 17th, 1977, 8:07 a.m., an abandoned cannery behind Utah State Prison. Gilmore sat strapped to a wooden chair with a paper target pinned over his heart. 5 volunteer officers waited behind a curtain, asked for his last words. He said, "Let's do it." In 1988, Portland ad executive Dan Whedon recalled those words while developing Nike's first major campaign and changed them slightly to "just do it." Nike held 18% market share that year. Within a decade, 43% with billions in global revenue. That slogan is still running. Gilmore donated his corneas before dying. 2 strangers received their sight from a man who chose death. His ashes were scattered illegally from a plane over Utah. A final act of lawlessness from beyond the grave. Number 17, Papillon was almost entirely invented, and the author admitted it to his publisher before the book even came out. Henri Charrier's 1969 memoir described 9 escapes from Devil's Island, culminating in a leap from towering cliffs into the sea on a coconut bag raft. It became an international sensation. Journalist Gerard de Villiers examined prison records in French Guiana and found roughly 10% of the book is true. Devil's Island held only political prisoners. Out of 70,000 men sent to the colony, about 50 ever went there. The island has no tall cliffs. Prison records show Charrière had one unauthorized absence in 11 years, not 9 escapes. A heroic shark rescue he described was carried out by a man named Alfred Steffen, who lost both legs and died. The publisher later confirmed the manuscript was submitted as fiction and persuaded Charrière to sell it as autobiography. When critics pointed out the discrepancies, Charrière shrugged. I didn't have a typewriter with me. The greatest prison escape in history was the last con he ever pulled off. Number 18. Oscar Wilde died broke, alone, and in a flea-ridden Paris hotel room. And the wallpaper joke was almost certainly never his last words. This is the one that sits with me. Wilde spent 2 years in Reading jail for gross indecency, a crime that today would not register as anything in most of the world. Inside, he was made to walk in circles for 6 hours a day. In 1895, he collapsed at Wandsworth Prison and ruptured an eardrum on the stone floor. During his transfer between prisons at Clapham Junction Railway Station, a crowd jeered and spat on him. He was released in May 1897 with 2 shillings and a railway ticket to France, and never set foot in Britain again. He drifted through Paris writing almost nothing, surviving on the loose charity of acquaintances, running up a tab he could not pay. He died November 30th, 1900, at age 46, in room 16 of the Hôtel d'Alsace, a second-rate boarding house with peeling walls and flea-ridden sheets. The cause was cerebral meningitis, almost certainly stemming from that untreated ear injury sustained in prison, not syphilis as was long believed. The famous wallpaper quip, "Either the wallpaper goes or I do," was reportedly said to a journalist named Claire de Prats several weeks before his death, when he still had the strength for wit, while by the end he had none. The earliest written record of the quote appeared in 1929, nearly 30 years after he died. He was initially buried in a 6th-class pauper's grave, with quicklime poured over the coffin, meant to decompose the body quickly. Instead, it preserved him. His remains were moved to Père Lachaise Cemetery in 1909 under a Grand Angel monument. The flea-ridden hotel room where he died is now a luxury boutique charging over €300 a night. The offensive wallpaper is long gone, replaced by something tasteful and expensive. The greatest wit of the Victorian age died penniless, in a room he could not afford, in a country that was not his, speaking a language that was not his mother tongue, having been destroyed by a law that no longer exists. The world took everything he had, kept what it wanted, and quietly forgot the rest of him. Sometimes history doesn't punish the people who deserve punishment, or sometimes it just grinds down the ones who were too brilliant for it to understand. If you made it this far, you now know things most people will go their entire lives without knowing, pulled from declassified files, autopsy records, and prison documents that were always there, waiting for someone to look. Tell me in the comments which one stopped you cold, which story did you already know, and which one genuinely floored you. Hit like, subscribe if you haven't. Why share this with someone who still believes the movie version, and ring the bell so you catch what's coming. Next week, there's more that never made it into the history books. The official version is always the cleaned up version.